Well, I'm now joined by Professor Mark Cohen from Columbia University. Mark, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You've just come off the main stage, having given your keynote address at the first day of the World Retail Congress here in Amsterdam. A very warm welcome.
Thank you.
Mark, you're, I think, if you don't mind me saying it, a very rare breed. You know, you're a hard retailer, and now you're an academic, or maybe you're both at the same time, which is, I think, a really interesting perspective as retailing becomes far more complex and probably far more sort of thoughtful and analytical. Let's just take a step back. When you were running major retail groups in the States, what was your view of academics who lectured about retailing?
Well, I often heard or read of various theories, only some of which had some relationship to the reality that I was facing. I'm surrounded by very smart people at Columbia, most of whom have never made a payroll in their lives. So I say that and they groan, and I listen to some of the theories they have, and I groan.
Well, it's a very sobering thought, isn't it, when you look at the sales and look at the payroll for the following week and you think,
Well, the consumer space is volatile, the consumer space is erratic, the consumer space is easily disrupted, and so you have to apply theory with a grain of salt. You have to be able to validate some of these intellectual precepts with on-the-ground facts.
Again, looking back at your days at the helm of some of the biggest retail names that the world has, would you have predicted a retail environment such as the one we have today?
Well, I think I did back in the day with others predict the shift back to direct-to-consumer. You know, in the 50s and 60s, it was the catalog that customers did business with, where they didn't physically go to a store because they didn't live near a store. As the Great American Shopping Mall in the United States became ubiquitous, customers responded to the availability of convenient places to shop. They did it with alacrity. The catalog business more or less disappeared. The customer became handcuffed to a physical space. They had to physically go somewhere to browse, to consider, and to transact. Many retailers took advantage of that captive audience that they had. And then along comes the internet. And I would say about 20 years ago, I sat in a room with some very senior, exalted retail gods, some of whom said this internet thing is a gimmick. Customers will never grant a retailer the use of their credit card. People like me raised my hand and said, wait a minute, every time you go to a restaurant, you grant someone the use of your credit card. And so with others at the time, we felt there was going to be a migration path, and it certainly has occurred faster than anyone would have imagined on both a global and local basis. Now the foot race is delivery and service. Amazon has just upped the ante in the United States by going from 2-day shipping to 1-day shipping, which is a nightmare for virtually all those folks who are chasing them. The customer expects it, you know, the customer expects tremendous access and transparency.
Who's winning and losing in that situation? I mean, it feels like actually the customer is winning every time in this new transactional relationship.
Well, the customer is the big winner, and for the foreseeable future, I think that's going to continue to be the case. The retail winners are the folks who are able to build market share on a sustainable basis, and along the way figure out how to make some money doing so.
Well, let's talk about the figure out on how to make some money, because there is an amazing strain on the traditional retail P&L. I mean, can it survive in its current state, that P&L, or does there need to be some real fundamental shift in those ratios? Because the ratio of sales to staff costs, and I mean, they've been pretty much the same since God was a boy.
Well, I think that a traditional legacy retailer can continue to be successful if they create an omni-channel portal, which is to say they make their goods and services available both online and physically. And they run an extremely effective, efficient, and high-tone operation. They can't spend money that's not productive. On the other hand, they have to present themselves in a really top-drawer way.
And how difficult is it now to isolate what's productive and what isn't productive?
It's very difficult, but it's not rocket science. So you need really great stores where you have stores that are located in really the most correct locations. The stores have to be properly sized, which is to say not too big and not too small.
It's the Goldilocks of retail, isn't it?
Absolutely. The merchandise presentation has to be exciting and interesting and engaging. And it has to go hand in glove with what you're doing on the internet. So a customer sees you in a variety of ways that all speak to your brand. The interaction with customers has to be really outstanding, especially with regard to store interaction, because after all, retail is about an organization or an enterprise conveying a good or a service to someone on a human scale. You know, there's a handoff to a human being, not a robot. And so your customer service in a store has to be par excellence, and your customer service as delivered through your web business has to do the same.
And to do that, are we going to see more and more of, I suppose, what I would call a mix of where sort of human rhythms meet algorithms, where you actually put those two forces together?
Well, I think there's always been the presence of data. It's now called big data. It's always been there.
So it'd be good if people actually use the small data they have, let alone the
well, retailers famously ignored the data unless it confirmed the beliefs that they had.
Oh, yes.
So they conveniently edited.
As an ex-retailer, I've done store walks exactly like that.
So big data is not new, but the techniques and tools available to examine and analyze data in almost real time are becoming increasingly important. But I want to stress something. There's an element of wildness to the retail business that in our lifetime, AI is not going to overcome. The ability for customers to pivot, change direction at the drop of a hat, to fall in love with something that no one would have ever expected, or to fall out of love with something or with a brand in the same regard.
You know, again, if you look backwards, there were some real big retail beasts, you know, who had phenomenal instincts, who could smell a good product when they saw it, who were amazing merchants. It feels like those big animals have disappeared into this world of algorithms and data and science. And
well, the traditional princes and princesses have fallen to earth, having placed one too many wild-ass bets that didn't pan out. They're lying in waiting, or their successors are lying in waiting or standing in the wings, ready to reassert themselves. But when they do, they'll be doing it with more of an intelligent view of what's possible, as opposed to just placing bets. I think the business has become too complicated, too treacherous, too risky for these kind of, I woke up this morning and decided that purple is the color. So every store is going to carry a lot of that color.
You're in a very advantaged position. You have the ability to spend time thinking. You have the ability to look into the future with the very bright people that you have within your department and university. What do you see in your probably more accurate crystal ball than the rest of us have?
Well, I see that the world has shrunk to the size of a marble, literally. The only component that is insurmountable is the time to distance, and even that is shrinking. And so merchandise moves from southern China to the west coast of North America in 8 days, or in 24 hours via airplane. The fact of the matter is that merchandise is being manufactured on the other side of the world to suit a customer's decision, shipped and delivered literally within a few days, certainly within a week or so. So this speed to market has become increasingly evident. The fact is that the consumer space is worldwide. Middle class has emerged virtually everywhere in the world. Maybe Africa is yet to be has yet to insinuate itself on a large scale, but that's going to happen. And so this consumer class that responds to fashion and newness is just unbelievable in its potential. And the retailers that are going to be successful in this century are going to have to be able to spot those customers, read their reactions to trends, and act upon those reactions quickly.
And therefore, what skills do you think the successful retailers will need to have to be able to do that?
Well, as I said in my keynote, it's a left brain, right brain skill set. Most people don't possess both pronounced skills, but I think every successful organization will have to possess both pronounced skills. Organizations have to become extremely creative while at the same time analytically determinable.
So do you see a time when there's almost like a pairing of a merchant and an analyst who work literally hand in glove with each other?
Well, the unrestrained merchant prince and princess are unreliable as leaders.
So I'm sure we both worked with in our past.
The unrestrained bean counter is deadly.
Yes.
And so it is a duopoly, if you will, and it has to be not just at the top, but throughout the organization. There has to be parallel groups that work together, respect and enjoy each other's skill sets, and to a customer deliver something that's exciting and successful at the same right.
Now we're in the midst of either negotiations or a trade war, whichever side of the fence you're on, between China and the US. Who wins a trade war, especially this particular one?
If the trade war is between two superpowers, there are no winners. There's no question from an American vantage point, but possibly from a worldwide vantage point, that China has taken advantage of its trading partners in a whole variety of ways, not the least of which is refusal to protect international or intellectual property rights. But on the other hand, starting a fight publicly calls for an ability to save face, which is impossible, given that in a war there is a winner and a loser. And so the U.S. has tremendous need to win and no capacity to lose, and so do the Chinese. So I'm shocked that this has become what it is, which is a spat with tremendous misrepresentation of facts, principally on behalf of our president, who still seems to think that the Chinese government is paying the tariffs.
Yes.
I mean, somebody wake him up and get him to realize that it's the consumer that pays the price.
Presumably retailers can't absorb that 20-25%? Or?
Well, a Chinese manufacturer may or may not be able to absorb some of it. An intermediary partner who bears the tariff itself may be able to absorb some of it.
Except a lot more retailers are going direct now, so
exactly.
they don't have that cushion.
At the end of the day, like in the days of quota, I'm dating myself because I go way back, it's the consumer who pays the price. It's an added component of the cost of goods sold. And it's not going to be transparent at a tariff rate of 25%. So this is going to cause prices to inflate. This is going to cause demand to be muted. This could bring on a recession in the United States far sooner than we would normally see it. It's anybody's guess just how much tit-for-tat retaliation is going to take place. The Chinese yesterday announced a first round of retaliation. They have some extraordinary triggers or bullets in the gun that they hold, as does the United States. And so this is a very unsettled and inappropriate time that we're witnessing.
Now, one last question. Again, from your vantage point, both looking sort of backwards and looking forwards, how would you sum up the retail times that we're living in today?
Well, the good news is there's no shortage of customers.
Yeah.
Plenty of customers. Yeah. And in many parts of the world, they have plenty of disposable income, downturns notwithstanding. In the U.S., they're loading their disposable income wallet with credit card debt, once again, which is another crisis yet to be faced. But at the end of the day, consumers are out there, they have money to spend, and human beings are hard-coded everywhere in the world to be very responsive to fashion and newness, things that they really want that they don't really need. So I think up top the business is just fine. It's the inside of the business that's going through this terrible disruption.
Well, that's a sobering but thoughtful way of ending our conversation. Professor Mark Cohen from Columbia University, thank you very much, Steve, for joining us.
You're welcome.